Hey HeyItsMeB, and welcome back to my channel where I like to discuss all things nostalgia. So nostalgia TV, nostalgia movies, and anything in between. And of course, because iCarly was from our childhood, what better thing to cover on this channel than iCarly Reboot 2021. So honestly, I must have been living under a rock these past few months because I do not even remember there being an announcement that there was going to be an iCarly reboot, let alone they were even filming one. So you can imagine how shocked I was when I saw that Instagram post on Miranda Cosgrove's account. Like, since when were y'all filming an iCarly reboot? Okay, I did not know about this. But you know what, it was a good surprise because I got to relive the old iCarly days and I got to see what iCarly in the future will look like. So in today's video, I'll be going over why I think iCarly 2021 is a reboot done right. But before I go into that, I actually want to look over what defines a reboot, because if you actually look at the definition, I don't even think iCarly 2021 is a reboot. I would consider it a revival. So let's look over the definitions. So from my extensive research, and of course this just could be subjective, you might have a different definition for what you think a reboot is, but what I discovered as a reboot is a brand new version of an older work with the same concept but no direct connection to the original. So think the Spider-Man reboots, okay? We've had like 3 different Spider-Mans in our generation, from Tobey Maguire to Andrew Garfield, all the way to Tom Holland. And each Spider-Man was Spider-Man at a certain time. It's just that they were reboots. So every time we get a different reboot, we get a different Spider-Man. So that's what I think a reboot is. Basically, same story, same plot, same characters, but different actors and a different time period. So what is iCarly 2021, you might ask? Well, I think iCarly 2021 is a revival, and a revival is defined as a continuation of the original series with most of its original cast after several years. So we still have most of the original cast, Carly, Spencer, Freddie, and it's still following the same concept, which is Carly doing her web series. So yeah, that is where I would categorize iCarly 2021, and also like most of the reboots that we've gotten in the past. So Raven's Home, Girl Meets World, I will talk about those later, but let's move on. So essentially a revival is kind of a sequel, but years later. So a sequel is a direct continuation of previous films / shows used to build a franchise, and it happens immediately after. So like a sequel will happen maybe a year or 2, sometimes 3, depending on how long it takes to film it, but it happens immediately after. And revivals, they're usually like a decade after. It's like much longer. It's like sequels, in my opinion, you knew that they were going to happen. They made the movie with the intention of making a sequel. Meanwhile, revivals, they were never an intention to make a revival. It was more so fans wanted the show back and then they decided to revive the series or movie. And that usually happens a decade after, like the impact of the original has already happened. And then lastly, we have spin-offs. And the reason why I wanted to talk about spin-offs was because sometimes reboots and revivals can also fall into spin-off territory. So let me give you the definition of what a spin-off is, because I think there's actually 2 different ways spin-offs happen. So the first way is giving an already existing supporting character their own TV show or movie. So think like Puss in Boots from Shrek. Very popular character that ended up getting his own movie. And the second way that a spin-off can happen is when you use the same universe or concept, but with completely new characters and story, which obviously means completely new cast as well. And I think a good example of this is High School Musical, the series, because clearly that's still in the High School Musical universe, but it's not a reboot or a revival because, first of all, High School Musical was a movie. This is a TV show. Also, High School Musical was a completely different story than High School Musical, the series. And High School Musical, the musical, the series is very meta. Okay, I admit, I had never watched the show, but I've watched like clips and people reacting to it. And it's a very meta show and not at all similar to what the original movies are, but it still falls into the High School Musical landscape of things. I mean, obviously with High School Musical in the title, but that's why I would consider that one a spin-off. But what's interesting about this is that it seems like there are a lot of TV shows and movies that actually fall into multiple categories. Like, for example, it would seem as if it's a spin-off, but it also could be a reboot. And one example of this that I generally think is a mixture of 2 different ones is Raven's Home. So Raven's Home, you could consider that a revival because we're still following Raven, but also the show focuses mostly on her kids, so you could consider that a spin-off as well. Same with Girl Meets World, but again, I will discuss those later. All right, so now that we've went over our definitions and we've classified what iCarly 2021 is, let's go over why I think this revival has been done the best. So the main reason why I think iCarly's 2021 has been done better than any revival that we've gotten so far is because the show stays true to its original audience. They do not try to pander to any younger audience. They don't try and win over a bunch of 12-year-olds. They're focusing on their original, already existing audience. And that might not seem like it's a big deal, but when you've gotten shows back to back that make all these promises that we're going to get continuations of the original story and that they get us all excited and give us false hopes when we see all these original cast members coming back to the show, and then lo and behold, the show is about their kids, it's very disheartening, okay? So it's great to see a show that's actually meant for the audience that it grew up with. For example, Raven's Home and Girl Meets World. These two shows broke my heart because Boy Meets World and That's Raven were some of my favorite shows growing up. And when I heard that we would be getting revivals for these shows, I was so excited. But then the shows ended up not being what they should have been. And they really didn't live up to the expectations of the originals either, mostly because the show was not even trying to connect with the original audience anymore. They were trying to connect to a bunch of kids. And not that it's like really an issue of trying to connect to different audiences, but if you already have an existing audience, why even try to alienate them? You know what I mean? Like, you have a show that was popular over a decade ago. All of the people that watch the show are now grown up in their mid to late 20s. You have a gold mine there for a show, but instead of just simply continuing the story and making the content just a tad bit mature, you go the opposite way by catering the show to younger audiences and basically leaving the original audience out to dry. Like, how are we supposed to relate to a bunch of middle schoolers? It does not make sense. So I wish that a lot of these shows had went the route of iCarly's 2021, and maybe the shows that I just mentioned probably wouldn't have been able to do that because they were airing on Disney. I think the reason why iCarly's 2021 works is because they're not airing it on Nickelodeon, they're airing it on Paramount Plus, which is a streaming service, and it's not held to the same standards of regular cable TV, especially cable TV that's catered towards kids. Now, had Girl Meets World and Raven's Home aired on like streaming services or even something like Freeform or the CW, maybe not the CW, but it would have just done way better because it would have had more chances to actually connect to older audiences, which happened to be the original audience. And not only did these previous shows cater to a new audience and therefore alienated the past audience, they also alienated the past cast members as well. Mostly Girl Meets World. Girl Meets World is the absolute worst about this. I can't even explain to you the disrespect that went on with this show because Corey and Topanga, we were all there for them, okay? We were all here for Corey and Topanga. Get to Girl Meets World. The show airs. Corey and Topanga only come out when they want to give the kids advice. I don't even remember a time where they had a significant storyline just to themselves. And don't even get me started on Sean, okay? Sean's out here trying to like build a relationship with Maya. Why don't you find Angela? Why don't you find Angela? Like, it's nice and all that you want to take care of Maya. It really is. Why don't you take care of Angela? Why don't you go find Angela? And luckily, Raven's Home wasn't as bad about this. I mean, the show was still kind of focused on Raven, hence why her name was still in the title. But still, we didn't get as much of a focus of the story on her than we did compared to her kids. And albeit, the show was much more enjoyable to watch than Girl Meets World was, mostly because Raven's hilarious, and I think her kids were able to play off of that. But there's so much untapped potential with the story that we could have gotten, but they were too focused on giving us stories with the kids. And this is why the Lizzie McGuire revival hurts me so much, because this is exactly what Hilary Duff did not want. She didn't want a show catered to younger audiences. She wanted a show like iCarly 2021. And Disney was like, nah. They literally told her no. They were like, you know what? I know you're in your 30s, but like this show isn't family enough. It's not family centric enough. What the hell? I'm just so annoyed about that. Okay, Liz McGuire was my favorite TV show growing up, and when I heard they were going to get a reboot, I was so excited and I liked the way it was going. But unfortunately, for some reason, Disney Plus did not want to go the mature route, even though they have shows like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where you've got Dollar Tree value version Captain America out here killing people, out here chopping people's heads off, out here absolutely acting like a fool. Okay, you had no problem showing that, but Lizzie can't have a drink in a bar?
Oh, okay.
Lizzie can't cuss?
Oh, okay.
Lizzie can't have a one-night stand? I don't understand it.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I don't get it. I don't get it. let's hope, let's pray for that Proud Family reboot, because apparently we're getting one. Let's hope they don't do the same thing that they did to these other shows. But yeah, that's essentially why I think iCarly 2021 is doing so well right now, because they stayed true to the original audience. So in my opinion, if you want to make a good revival series or movie, you need to remember who your main audience is and cater to them, okay? Make them the main priority. Don't try and focus on other potential audiences. Okay, it's good if you get another audience from the show, but do not make that your main priority. Focus on what you already have. So now that I'm here, I do want to discuss iCarly 2021 in depth. I'm not gonna lie to you, the first 3 episodes were kind of rough for me. I wasn't feeling it at first, and I actually did record this video before a week ago. And I was lying to myself. Okay, I was really lying to myself. I'm like, iCarly 2021 is great, and I did not believe it. I don't know why the first 3 episodes just didn't really click with me. I mean, the show was still more entertaining than the other shows I had just mentioned, simply because I could relate to it, but the show just wasn't as good as I was hoping it to be until I watched the 4th episode, okay? The 4th episode actually pleasantly surprised me, okay? I don't know what it was about the 4th episode, but it was funnier. The cast seemed to gel better together. There was more of a chemistry there. Miranda wasn't as awkward with her lines. Miranda, love you, girl. But we could tell that you took a break from acting. But you did a lot better in episode 4. And that's actually one of the things that I wasn't really liking a whole lot about the first 3 episodes. The line delivery was pretty awkward, not just for Miranda, but for some of the other actors as well. But I think maybe they were just trying to get back into the swing of things. Another thing that I really am not a fan of for iCarly 2021 is the actual web series, like iCarly within the show. And I think looking back at it, I never really liked iCarly the web series. I was only really there for the actual show. The one thing with the iCarly web series is that it was very childish, okay? Very, very childish. But it worked because they were kids. Fast forward all these years later, the content has not changed whatsoever. So it was very awkward to watch, and it wasn't funny. And it was a bit confusing because if this was real life, nobody would be hyping up that content. Like, we would be making fun of her. Sorry, like the web series is just not hitting. And I kind of wish they had went a different route with the web series. Maybe they will. I mean, the show is only 4 episodes in. They could try and evolve her content, but I wish that they would kind of go the route where her content just does a complete 180, because that's kind of what happens to a lot of these big YouTubers that have been around for years. Think about Anthony Padilla. He's huge right now with his videos in the talk show format, but he also was huge with Smosh. But the thing is, like, for me personally, I never watched Smosh, it wasn't my thing, but I have watched Anthony Padilla's religiously. I love his videos, and I think that's kind of what needs to happen when you've been around the internet for so long. Your content does need to change. And the thing with iCarly is that her web series has not changed at all. So I can't really find it too realistic that her web series would be as popular as it was before. It would gain more attention in the future because her content hasn't changed, you know? That being said, I'm glad that Carly herself hasn't changed. The characters, I feel like, stayed true to their original personalities. Like, Carly's still kind of awkward and goody two-shoes. Freddie is still kind of a know-it-all. Well, he's a little bit of a know-it-all. But he's kind of like over it as an adult. I feel like his personality as an adult is pretty realistic. Not the fact that he's a dad though, but I'll get into that later. And Spencer hard carried iCarly in the past, and he's still hard carrying iCarly in the future. Spencer's just hilarious, and I like that his character experienced success with his art. Nice to see. And of course, we need to address the elephant in the room here, which is Sam and Gibby not returning to the show. And I'm not gonna lie to you, you can tell that they're missing. The presence that they had, it was just so strong in the original. That them being gone, it does kind of change the dynamic of the show. It really does, especially with Sam being gone. But you know, who's gonna fault them on not wanting to return? I mean, they have very valid reasons to not want to show up, especially Jeanette McCurdy. I mean, who would want someone to just sacrifice their happiness, their safety, and anything else for the sake of a show? I mean, let's be real here. We could be sad that they're not returning, but at the end of the day, they took matters into their own hands and they took care of themselves, and that's all that matters. So of course, when there's old characters that don't return to a show, usually that means there's new characters that show up. And so with iCarly 2021, we have Harper Millicent. And to be honest, whenever I see new characters get added to an already existing, cast, I do get a bit nervous. Because a lot of the times they don't really mesh well together. Sometimes the new characters aren't likable, sometimes they're awkward, sometimes the actual actors don't really have much chemistry with the already existing cast. I mean, a lot could go wrong when you add new characters to a show. Okay, worst case scenario, it could have been like that one guy from that 70s show that replaced Eric Foreman and was flat out terrible. No chemistry with Donna, terrible line delivery, very awkward, not funny at all. I mean, you will never be Eric Foreman. You will never be Eric Foreman. I don't remember his name. It's not even relevant.
Sorry to this man.
But they really should have ended the show when Eric left, because it went downhill very quickly after that. And that's one thing I was scared of with this show. Like, I don't know if these new characters are going to really do it for me. But luckily, I actually do think there's a lot of potential in these two new characters, mostly with Harper. So with Harper, clearly she still falls into the sassy black best friend trope. I'm sure some of you may not have noticed that. Obviously, because I'm black, I noticed that right away. She is still likable though, and I do think the first 3 episodes were kind of rough with her because, first of all, we didn't really get a proper introduction to her character. She was just kind of there. We didn't really know how her and Carly met. We didn't really get the background with them. And all of her scenes at that point were just supporting Carly and saying funny one-liners. And that is like the worst recipe for a stereotype. But luckily, episode 4, they actually did give her a bit of a background, and we got to find out that she wants to do fashion. And so I do think her character has a lot of potential to actually be given her own storyline down the line. And I also think that her character is very likable. And I mean, her character is kind of funny. And I do like the actress that plays her. I think she does a really good job playing her. Now, moving on to Millicent. Millicent. Let me just start off by saying, the minute I see a kid added to a cast like this, I know things are gonna start going downhill. And no hate to the kids. I mean, I am not a child hater. Like, no hate to y'all. Keep doing what you're doing. Just not on my shows. But usually it just means that the show's just going to immediately start focusing on the kid. Luckily though, with iCarly 2021, that did not happen. Millicent is still very much a supporting character. The issue I have with Millicent is though, her character is just not needed. Like, I just don't understand why Millicent is added to the show. She's introduced as Freddie's adoptive stepdaughter, but yet she has very little scenes with Freddie, so we don't really get that chemistry between them. I do not for 1 second believe that Freddie could even be a father in general, but these two don't even scream parent and child to me. They really don't. So her presence in the show is a bit confusing because she's not really showing us that she's the daughter of Freddie, and she's mostly spending a lot of her scenes with Carly, and it's just a bit confusing as to why she's there. Not only that, but her character also plays into another stereotype that I'm sure a lot of Black women are familiar with, which is kind of like the annoying, bratty, and sometimes perceived way older than they actually are younger sister. So a huge example of this is Erica from Stranger Things, who's Lucas's younger sister. And if you look up her name on YouTube, you will find tons of discourse about her. Her character really does play into a huge stereotype. And I kind of see similarities with Millicent as well. And much like Erica did in the beginning of Stranger Things, Millicent doesn't really serve much of a purpose in this show besides giving low-key kind of mean one-liners. And so I really do hope that her character is kind of solidified in her purpose in the show later on in the season. And I hope they treat her character like she's an actual kid, because the way that they write her character, you wouldn't really think of her as a child. I mean, I'm not sure how old she is. I think she's like around 12 maybe or something, maybe even younger than that. But yeah, I really hope they do more with her character, because so far it's just kind of a stereotype right now. But again, no hate to the actress, okay? She's doing well with what she has. And also her hair always looks great. Great hair. So despite all of the negative things I just said, I still do really like iCarly. I think that the show's heading in a really good direction. I like how the characters are still staying true to their original personalities. I like that they kept the theme song. I like that they kept a lot of the original set for Spencer's apartment. And essentially, I think the show could be a really great thing. I just hope that they find a way to evolve the iCarly web series content as well as give these new characters more of a purpose in the show. Anyways, that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really want to hear what you guys think about the iCarly revival. Do you like the show? Do you have any qualms with the show like I do? Do you like the new characters, or are you really not a fan of this revival? I would like to hear your opinions. Leave them in the comments below, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Bye.
I never understood why somebody would